Happy Friday morning and welcome back to Buckeye Breakdown. Buckeyes now on Sports Illustrated, and we are ready to go because the season is essentially here. It is Friday morning, which typically would mean the day before a game, but for week one, it is the day that marks the start of week one because of Thursday night's game against Minnesota. And so all of the thoughts we've had about getting revved up for the start of the season and for diving into training camp and getting excited about position battles, it's pretty much all behind us at this point. We've got some answers, and the Buckeyes are ready to try and put their best foot forward in 2021. Alongside Brett Hiltbrand, I'm Brendan Gulick. This is our season preview podcast where we're going to chat a little bit about some of the biggest questions facing the Buckeyes here in 2021. We will certainly talk quarterback. We will talk national championship expectations. We're going to chat about some of the leadership on the team, how the team can try to make linebacker a strength after losing so many of their linebackers a year ago. And we will definitely talk about the secondary and the issues that they had in 2020 and how those can be best addressed. But Brett, it's fun to be here and talking about a season preview pod now that the year is essentially upon us.
Yeah, I'm very much over the wild speculation that we've been doing the better part of the last month. Let's talk tangible, and tangible stuff, things we can see, things we can actively kind of analyze and then wildly speculate beyond
that. There's always wild speculation.
100%.
Obviously, if you're listening to our podcast after the fact, we appreciate that, but know that you're able to follow along with us live. We do stream these live on our YouTube channel as well. Please follow us and subscribe there, and we would love it if you interacted with the show. Leave your comments and questions, and if they are certainly on topic and things that we can address. If you have questions coming into the season, let us know. We'll try to get to those. But I think you have to start with the quarterback. It's the most important position on the field. And you've got a guy that everybody within the team, within the building, has spoken very highly of and very confidently about in CJ Stroud. But I think there is some element of you got to go out and do it. And CJ Stroud has played very, very little as an Ohio State Buckeye so far. And so now all of those reps and all that chemistry that he's built with the first team offense, he's got to go out and show it, and he's got to be good right away because the Buckeyes open on the road in conference. Give me maybe just off the top here, what is your, on a 1 to 10 scale, how excited are you that CJ Stroud won the job, and how much do you believe he, is the kind of guy that can really take this offense to a great high level?
I would say my excitement level is actually kind of tied directly to the expectation that I had that he would win the starting job, which was in a lot of ways I felt like it maybe was a foregone conclusion in a lot of ways that he would kind of separate just simply because he was the backup a season ago, and I find it really hard sometimes to unseat some of that like very real, like tangible kind of in the room experience. So my excitement level is probably like a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. As far as what he can bring to the table, I think we've talked about it before on the podcast. The arm talent is maybe not as stark per se as we've seen from the last few Ohio State quarterbacks in that what he can do. And where he really separates kind of from everyone else's with arm talent. I don't actually think that's the case with CJ. I think it's more of the sum of all the parts. And I think that's a big reason why he's winning and won the starting job and will be out there here in a little bit less than a week. So I think in a lot of ways, it's almost a bit of an intangible thing. In addition to obviously his just remarkable quarterbacking ability, but I think the big thing for me is the fact that he doesn't get like 1 or 2 warm up games like you would see it traditionally from an Ohio State football schedule that has a kind of a random like West Coast team that plays week 1. then you play either an in-state school or, someone a little bit more regionally familiar, but obviously not even close to on par with Ohio State week 3. And then usually that third game is a non-conference, blue blood or something along those lines. That's not the case. You got to go on the road to a conference opponent who's been trending upward for a little while. And I think it is very much a toss you out of the boat and swim scenario for CJ. So that, I think, if you're Ryan Day, I think in a lot of ways that is actually more of, for me, it's more of a solidifying thing, knowing that was the opponent and that was what this team had to deal with, especially with the quarterback. And they felt comfortable enough making that decision now. So I think it's almost it's not comforting, if you will, if you're an Ohio State fan, but I think that there's obviously an unbelievable amount of confidence that they have in this guy, knowing that that's the first time he's going to get out there in real combat snaps.
I have always liked CJ, and perhaps, maybe it's come across that I've been advocating more for Kyle McCord than CJ. I think if I, reflect back on it, they have a slightly different skill set. I think CJ is a little bit more mobile. I can't speak to leadership skills and things like that because I don't, I'm not in the locker room watching these guys interact personally, and I don't think that's fair to speculate on that kind of stuff. But I have repeatedly said the one thing I really do like, between those two guys is I love Kyle's arm and I love his deep ball. The fact of the matter is Ohio State's got so much talent at wide receiver that no matter who plays quarterback, I really think, they're going to shine this year. But I'm interested to see how accurate CJ can be deep down the field. We've seen how big home run plays can break the game open. Perfect example, when the Buckeyes were playing at Clemson and Justin Fields, looks off a safety and finds Chris Olave for, something like 50 or 55 yards down the middle of the field. And that kind of felt like Ohio State stepping on Clemson's throat in the playoff last year. We saw, again, it's the spring game, right? There's not a whole lot of pressure in the spring game. It's a fun thing for fans. It's certainly meaningful for the team and for players and reps. But, you saw Kyle McCord's first pass go 65 yards, basically in stride, right down the middle of the field for a lengthy completion and had a lot of people kind of looking around going, okay, this looks pretty good. CJ won the quarterback job. He's obviously got the trust from Ryan Day and from his team. I am all willing to see what CJ's got. This was never for me a, Kyle or nothing bandwagon. I just like Kyle McCord. I think he's a really good quarterback, and I think at some point that he should get a shot. That said, there's no wiggle room to lose games. And, if the Buckeyes, to your point, were playing Tulsa and Akron in weeks 1 and 2, maybe you would have seen, a slightly less decisive manner in picking a quote unquote starting quarterback. Maybe they could have eased into it more. Even if you're not going to say that out loud as a coaching staff, you go play a conference game, you better have somebody that you're leaning on, ready to go. And then, of course, you play Oregon, and that is your one staple game in week 2. I like CJ. I think he's got a chance to have a really good season. I am excited about him for sure. I'm excited just to watch this offense because I think they can be that good. But I think this begs the question, Brett, when you're replacing a guy like Justin Fields, who's had the level of success that he had the last 2 years, who is clearly one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country over the last decade. I don't know if he was the most talented, but man, he is absolutely in the conversation as one of the most talented guys nationally. Is it fair to measure a guy who hasn't seen the field yet against his predecessor like that? Because I think a lot of fans are probably naturally going to do that.
No, it's not fair, but welcome to Ohio State. That's what we do anyway. And that's part of the deal, right? I think that's when you sign up to play at Ohio State, that's something that I think you sign up for. And I think in a lot of ways, coaches have made that part of the expectation process and something that these guys are aware of, even before they step foot on campus. It's not fair for sure. And I think too, we'll see this as kind of as kind of the season goes along, but it's also not a fair comparison because of some of the football stuff specific in that what Ohio State asked of Justin Fields will not be the same as what they're asking of CJ. And so that is that's a huge factor in my mind as kind of what responsibilities these guys had. By towards the end of that time, Justin Fields was responsible for about as much as a quarterback can be. I'm very confident in saying CJ isn't going to be even close to that percentage. And so that is, it's not a like for like comparison, but it's something that we'll do anyway. I do think that you are always going to be measured by Ohio State quarterbacks will always be measured by comfortable wins and then turnovers in crucial moments. And
do you beat Michigan?
Right. And that is something that, CJ Stroud doesn't get the benefit of with a couple kind of, warm up games where he'll play 2 halves and then it'll be, 43-0. And then the game, goes on from there with backups. That's not going to happen. He's probably playing the whole game against Minnesota unless something crazy happens, like they stink and we didn't know that, So, it's kind of a, hit the ground at a full sprint a little bit. And I think because that's what he's facing, he's going to be responsible for a little bit less. I think a lot of the schematics will be easier for him. I think that was something that really stood out to me early on in Dwayne Haskins' Ohio State career was how they let him not only grow into games, but grow into the season. That early worked hard to get him very easy completions, making sure that they were really able to pre-snap eliminate kind of one side of the field. And so he only had to work off of that one shoulder, that first, maybe second read. And then as he grew in confidence, the playbook got a little bit bigger and a little bit more open. And then all of a sudden he was calling protections. And then by the end, he had basically full pre-snap play calling duties, and then was able to kind of change plays from there. And so I think that'll be a little bit of the case with Stroud this year, in that he'll essentially have to kind of, he has like 3 tasks, and once he passes those, then there'll be 6, and then once you get to 6, you go to beyond that. And so it'll be spoon fed a little bit, I think, early on. The issue is, and I think the concern for these guys is that it's not a cupcake opponent.
Let's move maybe to another position here on the offense. I know you want to talk about running back. I think this running back room is as deep as it's been at Ohio State in a couple of years. Tony Alford has raved about the guys within this room. The biggest, most obvious component is that you've got a returning starter in Master Teague. I don't know if Master Teague is quite Ezekiel Elliott or J.K. Dobbins, level talent, but he is certainly a very good running back. As J.K.'s backup, he ran for 1,000 yards and was a third team All Big Ten guy. Will he be the bell cow back all season? Will the Buckeyes even have one throughout the course of the year? How many carries is Mayan Williams going to get? And what are we going to see from freshman star Travion Henderson? It's my anticipation that, Master's probably going to see, at least as, the quote unquote starter and the incumbent. I don't think he's done anything to lose the job. But I think the Buckeyes have some real depth behind him. And I do think there's going to be some sharing of carries there.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think Master will be the guy you see jump out there in that first series. I kind of think we've seen this in the past from Ohio State with under Urban Meyer, where essentially running back, there isn't necessarily like a quote unquote starter. It's a first series, second series, third series kind of situation. So I would not be surprised, that second series to see Henderson come out or Mayan Williams to come out. And then they go from there. I think too, you have to remember that Master T is coming off an injury, and that while he has like a clean bill of health, I think that is something that they're going to have to manage a little bit. And kind of what that looks like as far as wear and tear goes from his standpoint. And going along with that, the fact that there's a tremendous amount of depth in this room as far as guys that I believe that they trust, that aids them in kind of this process. But I think Master will probably get the lion's share of the meaningful snaps, so to speak. But I think what we saw in flashes from Mayan Williams towards the end, of the season, with especially in the college football playoff, that those handful of runs that were just so dynamic was kind of like, like there's that kid from Winton Woods who like single-handedly dominated games, down in Cincinnati for a while. Right. And like, I think with Travion in a lot of ways is kind of a similar situation where it was like, we know like the high school tape is out of this world. What does it look like at that next level? And certainly I think like, he's kind of one of those guys who's got a high floor, high ceiling. And I would be shocked if he doesn't, get some snaps, in there and really like, showcase kind of that jump that a lot of times you see from guys, coming into this season.
Ryan Day was asked about Travion specifically, and has he had any of those like eye-popping moments in practice that so easily jump off a highlight film at you? And Ryan kind of side-eyed the reporter that asked a little bit, had a little smile. He goes, a couple. It was clear that Travion has made an impression on the coaching staff, and I just think there's gonna have to be a way that he figures into this offense somewhere along the way. And you're right, Mayan Williams in the playoff last year was very, very good. He doesn't like the nickname Meatball that he had kind of been given, I guess. He prefers Pork Chop, which I guess one of his teammates called him. So we can call him Pork Chop. That's fine. But he certainly, I think he's going to factor into this offense too. He really has looked good so far in camp. Couple guys on the offensive side that came back that I don't know if I would say weren't expecting, but pleasantly surprised. Thayer Munford and Chris Olave. I guess a lot of us, and certainly me included, had just sort of expected that, okay, they're going to go to the NFL. Probably be first or second round picks and go start their professional careers. Surprising. I remember exactly where I was. I was in the Newark airport when the news broke that Munford and Olave were coming back. And I remember thinking like, wait, what? Whoa. Yeah. Huge. And with Olave and the growth that we've heard from Garrett Wilson this year, I guess I'm really interested to see what the season looks like for those three guys in particular, because you talk about high floor, high ceiling. I mean, all three of those guys are first round NFL draft pick type talents, and have three of them on one offense is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absurd. This is a fascinating conversation, and I think it's made all the more interesting by what we saw with Shaun Wade last year, in the fact that Shaun Wade is probably like a fringe first round, second round pick coming into, going from 2 seasons ago and then into this past season, and comes back, has an unequivocally bad year. Now he changed positions. That's part of it. And cost himself money, like unequivocally, right? Like every snap where he looked bad, that was like like cha-ching coming out of like that proverbial money coming out of the bank account. And I that's something that I kind of wonder if guys notice and pay attention to, especially like the dudes who come back that were somewhat unexpected, who are on kind of those fringes of the first 2 rounds. When they come back, essentially they're coming back to improve draft stock and improve status and to be able to solidify that first round pick because of all of the, financial incentives that come from moving up, those like maybe 10 spots, going, from top 50 to top 40 or whatever. And he dropped twice that, right? And I wonder if the rest of the guys on that team who are kind of in that tier of players look at that and go like that's not going to be me, and because it was hard. It's frustrating to watch because you feel bad for him, right? And I think with Olave especially, who was a lock for a first round pick coming out of Ohio State last year. I think a lock first round wide receiver. Essentially what he's doing is he's coming back potentially to try and win a Heisman or something along those lines. And then you're guaranteed, probably top 10, top 15. That's like, to me, like that's even more surprising than like a guy like Shaun Wade who's on the fringes coming back. I was blown away that Chris Olave decided to stick around. Thayer Munford is another one who I thought was maybe not a lock for a first round pick, but he's certainly on the edges and is coming back to basically try and solidify that. And I think, that one maybe makes a little bit more sense to me. I think I could be kind of talked into that a little bit, but the Olave news was unbelievable. I was like set flat footed with it. And so for me, like, to be totally honest, the only thing I want to see from those guys on kind of a performance level is don't get hurt.
Sure.
Like, don't get hurt. Like that's like when they're in a position that they're in now, like that, like it's almost like heart and throat moments a little bit for me, thinking about what they are kind of putting on the line by coming back as opposed to jumping ahead. And I respect it. Like, guys like playing college football, guys like being in college, they, and I think that those are all admirable things. In fact, I kind of wish we would see a little bit more of that in college basketball, right? Like, but it's a little bit terrifying for me in some regards to watch these guys go out there and essentially putting $20 million on the line. Right.
I think essentially these guys come back because, they don't want to end their career on a real gut punch last January.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair.
They're here to try to win the national title.
And I think that's something that, 10 plus years ago, we probably aren't looking at this and having the conversation in this tone going like, wow, I can't believe that guy came back, because I think, didn't go. Because I think that was a lot more common where guys were like, I'm going to stay at least 3, maybe my full allotment of eligibility. That was a lot more common than dudes jumping now. So I don't know. I think the sky is the limit for Chris Olave, especially. Obviously, he doesn't have a dude delivering the football, from an arm talent standpoint, like he's had, in his time at Ohio State, both with Dwayne and Justin Fields. But in a lot of ways, I actually think that means that this year is a year where he can really show that, that elite talent, right? It was like, well, I don't have maybe an elite passer at quarterback, and I still went out and did X, Y, and Z and didn't necessarily show any drop off. And I think for Thayer, it's like a change of position, right? Like showing NFL teams and scouts, like not only was I an elite tackle, but I can be an elite guard in the NFL. And that versatility, like as from an offensive line standpoint, outside of being like an out and out, like tier 1 left tackle, if you can be a guy that's versatile and play a couple different spots, that's the next most valuable thing that an offensive lineman can showcase as far as NFL ability is concerned.
I totally agree. And, I'm not surprised that both these guys and Chris and Thayer were named captains this year. I think Thayer is I don't know if it's more than Chris, but he has some leadership traits and characteristics that are really, really attractive to next level coaches, but also to his current coaching staff because they trust him like crazy. His teammates trust him. I think there is a high probability Thayer goes out and has a great season, even with a position switch. I expect big things from him. I think you're going to see some cool stuff from Thayer. Where do we want to go next here? Why don't we go young? This freshman class, I mean, God, it's been talked about ad nauseum, how highly recruited they've been, the amount of incredibly talented freshmen the Buckeyes have brought in at positions all across the board. Some of them that you are certainly going to see at some point this year, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau on the defensive line. You might see J.K. Johnson and Denzel Burke get some snaps in the secondary. Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison probably going to factor in somewhere along the way in some wide margin scoring games at wide receiver. I think there's a lot of expectation around Travion Henderson getting some carries. Those are just a few of the guys, let alone, guys that, might just come into games when you see a blowout against a school like Tulsa or Akron or something. I look around the field there, and it's kind of hard to pick an area where I'm most excited, but I guess maybe the best question in sort of previewing the season, maybe the best question to pose is which incoming freshman do you think will have the biggest impact? Why don't we pick one on each side of the ball?
I'd say it's Henderson and Jack Sawyer. Those are the two for me. I think what we saw with Jack Sawyer in the spring game, especially, I think kind of solidifies that for me. He's not a guy that they're gonna lament essentially burning a red shirt for him. I just think he's too good, and I think he's kind of that next guy, three technique defensive end that is like a tier one, like NFL kind of draft pick, much in the same kind of line as like Chase Young and the Bosa's, right? Where that's the next guy that we're going like, man, that's a top 5 pick, and we're just watching him get better and better and better as going through 2-3 seasons. And to me, like the best way to kind of showcase that is what he looked like as a senior in high school and what he looks like now in the body transformation that he's kind of undergone. Like he was always like a big kid who looked like a freak. But now it's like, well, like kind of like, it's like a very, very stark difference. And that, it was like, to me, like I'm really excited to watch what he brings, because I also think there's he has a little bit of an edge that I think, someone like Larry Johnson really like leans into and can kind of like the guys who have that, like he coaches really, really well. And so I'm really excited to see kind of what he brings. I think he's for sure the guy on the defensive side. Denzel Burke, maybe, I think could slot in there a little bit. And kind of curious to see, and that's like that's a larger conversation about the Ohio State secondary too. I think JT probably will get some snaps. I think, to me, in a lot of ways, like how quickly some of those guys got the stripe off, right? Like is a good indicator of kind of what we might see from them.
Yeah. For guys that showed up in the summertime, blinked twice and JT lost his black stripe.
Right. So like, I think if you're getting that, that fast, I think that's a good indication of where you sit. in a trending way, but also I think it's a better indication of how quickly you move up the depth chart from guys who, been there, for a year or two.
Yeah.
Offensively, it's Henderson. I remember, I think it was Tom Luganbill was raving about what he saw from him. And I think he's probably an ESPN freshman All-American or whatever, that the new thing that they do there. So, and another guy who had lost the stripe really fast. Right.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
But to me, I think it's like the one thing about, recruiting rankings and everything about, 4-star, 5-star and kind of what that means. I think when you are like the number 1 5-star running back, it probably means you are like the most like game ready position out of maybe all of them. Right. Like
Sure.
what, especially Ohio State, essentially what they ask running backs to do, compared to say the other position groups, that the jump that a senior in high school going to a freshman in college has to make is a lot smaller of a jump, I think, than all the other position groups. So I think we're going to see him a lot. I think there's a little bit, given the fact that outside of Master Teague, who I think will get, like we said a little bit earlier, will get the lion's share of the carries. I think there is a little bit of a void behind him, whether that's Mine Williams or someone else, that I think eventually you'll see Travion fill.
I think I'm more excited offensively to watch Emeka and Marvin. But if the question is who makes a bigger impact, I'm more inclined right now to say Henderson. And don't get me wrong, I am excited to watch Travion play for sure. But there's something about watching Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. in training camp. The couple times we've been able to see him there, and obviously what they've done at the high school level. I mean, they're especially Emeka's tape. If you haven't watched Emeka Egbuka's highlight tape in high school, first of all, what are you waiting for? And second of all, it is legitimately one of the best high school football highlight tapes I've ever seen, like ever. It is ridiculously good. There's a reason he's the number 1 receiver in his class. And I cannot wait to watch that kid get out there. But I do think Travion's got a chance to make a bigger impact because he might be able to get on the field
less guys in front
faster, more regularly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
fewer
it's really just it's kind of a numbers thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah.
Let's talk secondary here. I know you started to mention it a little bit, but obviously that's a huge thing. A lot of people are keeping their eye on this year. They want to know how this defense is going to be better. It's been kind of a roller coaster lately. A few years ago, the defense really wasn't very good. 2 years ago, the defense was unbelievably good. Last year, it felt like the Buckeyes were winning games in spite of their defensive struggles. How can the secondary prove it early in the year with some similar faces, Sevyn Banks, Marcus Williamson, Josh Proctor, Malik Hooker, I think guys that are all going to factor in early. How can they prove early in the year that 2021 is going to be a better season?
Not get beat and don't struggle to tackle like we saw the secondary struggle, especially last year. The entire Ohio State defense last year ranked towards the bottom in college football when it came to tackling efficiency. And I've wondered a little bit about this for a while now because of how impressed I was with Jeff Hafley and what he did when he came in. And now, granted, he was working with first-round talent, talking about, Damon Arnett, Jeff Okudah, Jordan Fuller.
Yep.
Guys who are, were legitimately good. And I'm not entirely sure that's what exists currently in the Ohio State secondary, maybe not to the same degree. And given the fact that we have questions at linebacker too, right, with some inexperience there, that there's certainly some situational and personnel specific football situations that it might be a little bit concerning for this Ohio State defense, and what what that could look like. I'm really sure that it'll be very simple. There will be it'll be a pretty generic across the board. I don't think they're going to ask a lot of these guys, but I think to answer the question of like what do they have to do to like improve, the big thing for me is tackling and then really minimizing the mistakes in space. Like I always joke with this. I joke with folks all the time that like if I was like, I would playing like defensive back would be like one of my worst nightmares because like of how, especially like if you were like,
hard
a D1 quality guy, like it is, if you take one step the wrong way, if you do a weight shift and you have the weight on your wrong foot, you can get scorched for a touchdown. Like it is like, it's not like, playing linebacker where like if you fill the wrong gap, well, there's probably another couple guys behind you to be able to, maybe kind of cover you up. Like if you don't get the right protection call, pre-snap, you're guarding nothing. Like it is. I get it, like anxiety a little bit, like watching these guys. Like if you don't get your hips around in the right, like if your timing's wrong, if your eyes are in the wrong place, you don't get your hips around on, on a ball over the top, you don't get your head around, like you look terrible. Like they are absolutely playing with no safety net. And so I think everything that Kerry Combs and company can do to ease some of the burdens a little bit that, we saw from them last year, which was, I think, a couple things. One, I thought the lack of linebacker speed a little bit hurt the secondary a year ago. And then you saw like compounding mistakes, guys with eyes in the backfield a bunch. And I think like, certainly we saw like Alabama take advantage of that big time. But I keep it simple. Cover 2, cover 3, basically force teams to pick one side of the field and then tackle in space. Those are the two big ones for me.
I think there's a couple guys in particular that I'm really interested to watch. One of them is Josh Proctor. Proctor, I thought at times last year flashed okay, but I feel like he is in a more focal point role this year where the Buckeyes really need him to play well. So I'm going to be watching him closely week 1. We really haven't talked here about the bullet position much, but Craig Young is an athletic specimen. He's 6'4", 225, and runs like an absolute gazelle. I think Craig Young has a chance to be the guy on defense this year that Buckeye fans go, wait, who's this guy? He didn't make a huge contribution last year. You're going to know that name by the end of the year. This kid is he is as athletic as anybody on the entire defense, no matter what position. I think Craig Young's going to have a monster season. I'm really excited to watch him. So those are the couple guys I'm keeping an eye on for sure. Yeah. Go ahead if you had something to add there.
Yeah, I was Cameron Brown, I think, is another guy.
Sure.
That
Cam Martinez.
Given the fact that getting hurt, coming back, what does he bring? Our mutual friend Bo Bishop always talks about numbers and how guys who at Ohio State specifically, like the better the number, the more indicator of like your playing time a little bit. And I think Cameron Brown going, is number 26 as a cornerback. I wonder a little bit about that because a lot of times those, like if you're one, like how they pick numbers, like you go 1s, 2s, 3s, right? And like a lot of times, like what's left over. The fact that he didn't necessarily move up is one that I think makes me wonder a little bit. But I loved what he brought and what he looked like at the high school level and what that tape looked like. And so he's one that I think would be interesting to see. It's my dog's barking now upstairs.
Right.
I don't know. He's one. The secondary to me is like Marcus Williamson and like what that means. But like Josh Proctor, I think is by far the guy that we're looking at most, right? Because what you said was perfect, where there were flashes of like, okay, this is like the next like DBU/BIA guy, right? Like, and then looked like terrible at times, bad safety play, really bad eye discipline in spots. And so there, in my mind, there's kind of like a little bit of a redemption tour in a lot of ways for him specifically. I think it's certainly position group wide with the secondary, but I think a lot of these guys have a bad taste in their mouth from getting flat out embarrassed against Alabama in the last time we saw them. And so that I think only helps them. I think that's only a positive, but I have a lot of questions, let me put it that way, but going into this season when it comes to this group, just because what they look like and what they're going to be asked to do.
Yeah. Let's tackle two more things here. And if you have recently joined us again, this podcast streams live, but also available after the fact, depending on when you're listening. So if you are with us live on our YouTube channel or on Twitter, feel free to drop in your questions if you're interested, and we'll try to get to that as well. Maybe one of the biggest overarching questions about Ohio State themselves, Brett, just how important is it this season to win the national championship? Ryan Day's in his third year as head coach. This has obviously been, the most challenging of circumstances in the first couple of years to try and take over a juggernaut team that Urban Meyer had essentially handed him. And by all accounts, Ryan Day is the perfect guy for this program, and he's done a great job. Really didn't feel very good after the 2019 season when the Buckeyes felt like they had one stolen from them in the playoff against Clemson. And last year, the team hasn't really come out and said it quite like this, but they basically felt like they played Alabama with one hand tied behind their back. The lack of ability to practice leading up to that game, the lack of guys available and healthy for that game with all of the COVID stuff going on, they just didn't really feel like it was a fair fight. You obviously have a little bit of a different team, right? I mean, that's part of the game, but you still have an extremely talented program. And at Ohio State, the expectation is win the Big Ten, be in the college football playoff, and be right there in the conversation, compete, and go win a national championship. So I think one of the overarching key questions is how important this season is it for the Buckeyes to win it all? If they end up where they were last year, are you going to walk away feeling disappointed that they were that close again and didn't finish it? Do you need to see at the end of the year the Buckeyes standing on the stage in the middle of the field at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, which is not just hosting the Big Ten, by the way, it's hosting the national title game this year, holding the college football playoff trophy? Do they have to win the championship this year?
No, I don't think they have to win. Going back to what you said a second ago, all due respect to Ohio State, them at full strength, still not beating Alabama in the national championship game last year. And I understand their frustration.
It was 17-14 in the second quarter without their defensive line. I don't know. They had a hard time stopping an offense because they couldn't control the line of scrimmage. They couldn't get to Mac Jones. I am convinced that game could have gone differently if the Buckeyes had their full complement.
I mean, I'm that was just a different gear. And I think in a lot of ways it speaks to a little bit of like depth and what depth really looks like in that kind of that top tier at college football. By the way, totally agree the year before the game getting stolen from Ohio State.
That was awful.
The Clemson highway robbery with two of the worst calls in college football history, of which we have still yet to see any accountability now 2 years running from that. Good stuff, everyone. But going back to the overall kind of question, do I think Ohio State needs to win a national championship? No, because I don't think winning a title really influences, or I should say, coming up short in a national title run influences Ohio State beyond where they're at. I think we have to be aware that outside of wide receiver and maybe in a couple one maybe specific spot at defensive line, we're not talking about a team of absolute NFL superstars here. We're talking about a team that's kind of maybe a year away from that. And so I think a run is important. I think you showcase, all that potential, and then you get necessary experience for a lot of these guys. I think with the offensive line and how big they are and what that might look like from a physically kind of imposing standpoint, but also I think from a downhill violent blocking run game standpoint, that'll look a little bit like, oh, this is the year, but I'm not entirely convinced that it is. So I don't know if you can do it with a quarterback that hasn't really seen any high pressure actual game snaps. I really don't think it's possible.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think this team probably has the talent level to win it all. In some regards, you got to wait and see. But I am under the belief that they have the components to get it done. But I think there is a little less pressure on this group to win the whole thing based off the fact that they've got some youth and inexperience, especially at quarterback. I don't think it's fair, no matter who the quarterback is or who was going to win that job, whether it was CJ or Kyle or Jack or, if a transfer came in, without Justin Fields returning, I don't think it's necessarily fair to just lump national championship expectations, national championship or bust expectations. But by the same token, man, Alabama and Clemson are not backing down from it either. DJ Uiagalelei is going to be a first-year starter at Clemson. Same deal with Bryce down in Alabama. I mean, they have the expectation of go to the playoff and do what they've done regularly. And I think that's where the Buckeyes are. I think it would be rather shocking if Ohio State is not in the college football playoff this year. But I think the actual question of do they have to win the national championship this season, I tend to agree with you. I think next year is where they're going to have a better chance to do that.
I think there is a case to be made that there maybe isn't, given the fact that all three programs are essentially starting new quarterbacks. I think there is a case to be made that maybe there's a power vacuum that needs filling. But I think that the fact that there is so much talent and also inexperience at Ohio State right now in its starters, its 22 starters on both sides of the ball, I think is a factor. And I do think that this is an extremely motivated group. I think overall,
Absolutely.
if we were to kind of wrap this up and be like, what's like the one thing that you really jumped out at you with fall camp, right? Like, I think that would be what I would kind of put my finger on, was how motivated every single guy, kind of on a visceral level, on a body language level, looked like. Like, they look very, very hungry. And that's a really, really good thing, I think, for this team going forward.
But motivated in a different way, Brett, because last year you saw the sign, you heard the mantra, about beat Clemson. Like, that was a focal point. Get back to that Clemson-esque game and stick it to them after 2019. They felt like it was stolen from them. Haven't seen a lot of that about, beat Alabama this year. I think it's just been more of a, hey, let's get back to normalcy and you kind of get a piece of humble pie in the national championship game, regardless of the circumstances. I think, that's an internal motivator different than the feeling that was exuded from the Clemson loss 2 years ago.
Yeah, agreed. Right. Like, it's motivating, but in a different way. In that, I think you can't. I don't think you can look at that game and go like, It's like, oh, like beat Alabama in the same way that you did the season before. It's just a different. There was almost like a humbling kind of aspect to it that I don't think you can kind of go into it with the same tone that you did with the Clemson defeat the season before. And I think that's actually a good thing. I think this year it's about, in a lot of ways, I think it's about get all the experience you need to get ready for that stretch run. I think it's about being in a position to peak at the right time with respect towards when guys make that jump from kind of inexperienced to comfortable. And when we always say like the game slows down. And then I think it's about embarrassing Michigan in their building and finally getting Jim Harbaugh out of that job and showing once and for all a very finite kind of way that to really put a stamp on his tenure in Michigan. Because if he loses, they're done. Like he's done and really he should have been done last year, but that's a whole different conversation to have. But to me, like bare minimum expectation is make the college football playoff, right?
Yeah,
Like
I think that it's so realistic.
I don't really, for me, as given the landscape of the game and where Ohio State sits kind of in that hierarchy, that's bare minimum make the college football playoff. I think that's because what the Big Ten offers Ohio State leading up to it, where like, you know, yeah, you're not going to play some good teams, but you'll be better by the end of that conference play, because you have to be. Like there are some good, like decent football teams that if you don't bring it, you will get beat. And it's not like that in some of the other conferences, especially, you know, I think if we're talking about the ACC, it's most definitely not like that for Clemson. Clemson can kind of go on cruise control from that 9-10 games.
Yeah, with the exception of North Carolina this year, I agree with you. Clemson is kind of the program to beat in that league for sure.
Right. So like I think it bare minimum it's make the college football playoff, because that's what that is essentially what running through the slog, the physical battle, the physical war of Big Ten conference play. That's the reward. And then everything after that, I think for this team is gravy, because it pays dividends for what this team looks like in 2022.
So Ohio State hasn't lost a game within its own division since 2016 against Penn State. Obviously, the only two conference losses they've had in that stretch are two really frustrating clunker of games at Iowa and at Purdue. Yeah. Ryan Day has not lost a Big Ten game yet. And knock on wood, hopefully it stays that way. But I think as we kind of come full circle, we've talked quite a bit about the Buckeye team in previewing this season. And again, I know we have some new viewers that came in. If you have some questions that you want us to answer, please put those in the comments, and we'll certainly try to get to those. But let's look at the Big Ten for a second here. We don't need to do a deep dive on every program, but the couple that really, you know, I think are worth talking about. You've got an Indiana team that looks like they're going to be pretty good again. They bring a lot of pieces back from a team last year that surprised folks, and I think they are Ohio State's biggest challenger in conference. And then you've got Penn State and Michigan, two teams that, you know, are tradition rich and historically good, really proud, and had really bad seasons last year. You know, Michigan should not be struggling to beat Rutgers. As an Ohio State fan, you probably love that. Mm-hmm. But man, that's embarrassing for Michigan. And you know, I don't expect that Michigan is going to be quite that bad again. But I think Rutgers is a program on the rise a little bit. Let's talk about Indiana, Penn State, Michigan, and just in general, your expectations of what you think those three programs are going to put forth this year.
First of all, I would say if you're an Ohio State fan and if you're kind of delighting in the fact that Michigan stinks and is like a trending downward program, that's actually bad. That's a bad thing. You don't want that. You want Michigan at its best because of a couple things. What it means then to beat them in the game and what that represents, both specific to the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, but also in a macro level of what then Michigan brings to the Big Ten on kind of a prestige reputation type level. Like when Michigan stinks, everybody else looks at the Big Ten and goes like, well, like when Ohio State runs the table, like it feels like they always do. And then it comes time to pick the college football playoff. And if Michigan stinks, everybody elsewhere throughout the landscape of college football looks at Ohio State and thinks it's less than good or not as good. So you want Michigan to be at its best because that actually aids Ohio State in the long run. I think the same thing can be said about Penn State. I think they're at a bit of an inflection point with James Franklin. I think they plateaued when they had probably the best with what they had with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley in that stretch run where, they went to the Rose Bowl and then missed out on the college football playoff. Maybe probably should have gone. I think I could make the argument back in, I think it was 2016, that they maybe should have been able to go over maybe Ohio State that year. But I think you could have the best, graphic design, recruiting profile, Photoshop video people you could possibly have in college football at Penn State. And you can have, the best motivator kind of guy in James Franklin. And then you go out and you stink. Like it doesn't matter. And I think we joke a little bit about Penn State, given its history but that is a very, very proud football program. I don't think people realize, like, if you're not maybe inside that blue and white bubble, people don't realize how much power the Letterman Association has, that alumni association that's run by Franco Harris, by the way, how much power they have when it comes to both the budget for Penn State's athletic department and its kind of coaching influences. And so I think it's kind of put up or shut up. Another mediocre year and James Franklin will be gone. And so I think you have to kind of keep an eye on them and what is probably a pretty hungry team given what they did a season ago. Indiana is fascinating to me because I think first of all credit to what Tom Allen's done there and being able to take what's like basically a football program that was window dressing for a very, very long time into something that's actually tangible and getting recruiting classes that are like actually like showing up in like the first page of the rankings. That's a good thing. Until they actually like go out and beat someone, I could kind of give a crap, but like you can't look at them and go like, well, at the very least you are primed to be able to do that. And that's something that I think we never expected to be able to ever say about Indiana football. And that is that in a lot of ways is about as big of a compliment as you can get, as you can give to a Big Ten team kind of in that kind of tier a little bit with the football program and the assets and everything that Indiana has. So I think they're good. I think they what they want out of this season is a very, very simple formula, and it's beat Ohio State, period, point blank. And then whatever else happens is cherry on top, right? Like that they have one goal this year, and that's to beat Ohio State. That's all. And
I don't hear anybody in Indiana's circle or from their campus. I don't hear anybody over there, come out and say that. But I agree with you. They don't need to kick the hornet's nest. But I think it's pretty clear they felt like after last year's game was a heck of a lot more competitive than Ohio State fans, were hoping for.
And they play in Indiana. Like you have a home game. Like that's going to be the most electric football game in Indiana football history.
Probably.
I'm saying, like it's the biggest game they've probably ever had, at least that I'm aware of, is going to be that game. So, and then if they, anything else that happens is a downstream trickle down effect if they were to win that game. Everything else is extra as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. I expect Indiana to be the second best team in the Big Ten this year. I don't expect them to beat Ohio State, so I don't think they're going to play for a Big Ten championship. But I think at the end of the year, when you're trying to cross-compare numbers and things, I think they're going to be better than Northwestern and Iowa and Wisconsin. I'm not 100% sold on Minnesota being a really, really good football team. I think they're a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, every team in this league has some talent. You know, I really don't think there are too many programs that truly stink. The Big Ten is a good league. But when you're trying to talk about which programs are separating themselves, you know, right now it's Ohio State and then it's everybody else.
Right.
And I think Indiana right now is the best of the rest of that pile. I think Penn State is slightly better than 500. And I think Michigan, until they can prove that they can get it going with quarterback, which they have not done one time under Jim Harbaugh, at least not the way I want to, you know, see them establish a quarterback in a legit offense. I think Michigan right now is fourth or fifth in the Big Ten East. Are they capable of having a much better season? Of course they're capable of it, but I don't know. I just don't think Michigan's very good right now. And especially with Cade McNamara starting and you know, JJ McCarthy not winning that job, who knows at what point he'll see the field or not. Kind of feels to me like JJ McCarthy better be the right answer for Jim Harbaugh, because I think he's running out of time. But I just don't think they're that good.
And that's bad. I think that's
yeah,
like,
it's not fun.
The last time we talked about, you know, on the podcast, we were talking about the Big Ten, ACC, Pac-12 alliance. In my mind, we would talk about the health of the Big Ten and what is required from a kind of an on-field or on-court performance standpoint. What is required to continue to keep the Big Ten healthy? I think point number one is Ohio State keeps being Ohio State. The next one down, and there is not a big gap between number 1 and 2. Point number 2 is improve Michigan football and get it back to, you know, the heights that they were at. And I mean, I really, it's fascinating. I think for people my age, you know, grew up in the 90s and what Michigan was, and with Charles Woodson, and, you know, and like kind of the amazing teams that they had, and what they were doing, what they were able to do, and where they are at now is like, I have no idea how good they are. Like, how do we not know how good Michigan is? You know what I'm saying? Like, how's that even possible? And so, you know, we're talking about like where they rank in the Big Ten East. Like, we should be, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they should be interchangeable with Ohio State. Like, it should be a foregone conclusion in a lot of ways that like everything will hit, you know, kind of crux upon and will be entirely weighed upon that game that happens, you know, 2 days after Thanksgiving, right? That's what this should be. And instead we're stuck with like, well, can Jim Harbaugh get another quarterback for the 15th time in the last like however many years, right? Like, it's a problem, and it has to be better, because in a lot of ways, I think the long-term health of the Big Ten as a conference depends upon Michigan being like semi-competent. And right now it doesn't look like they are.
Yeah, I certainly hope they can figure it out. I agree with you. I mean, the best thing I can say is that rivalry, to me, is a lot more fun when you beat a good team as opposed to when you're, you know, it's fun to hang 50 and 60 on them. But I don't think it's doing much for helping Ohio State's national, you know, perception. When you beat the heck out of your rival, that obviously is a good look. But when your rival has not been good for a while, and like, maybe we should reevaluate what Michigan wants out of their football program. Maybe that could be a whole different podcast. It's just like, what are they okay being, and what are they not okay being? Because the recruiting gap has widened like crazy. And so if the talent gap continues to widen, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Michigan all of a sudden surges back forward in this series. They've got to recruit better. It can't just be quarterback. They've got to get better players, period. Can Harbaugh and his staff do that? I think they can. They just haven't been winning those. They haven't been winning those battles, and they've got to start. So there's no doubt, man. It is crunch time up in Ann Arbor right now, and I know they are kind of getting sick and tired of seeing Ohio State, run train over the Big Ten.
They are in danger right now in a lot of ways of where Florida State was maybe about a kind of right before Jimbo kind of came in and really took them to new heights, where if they stack up another mediocre season and they lose a head coach, it'll take 3-4 years of punching above their weight, both expectation wise, but also specific to the quality of recruits that they get. Because so much about college football recruiting now, when we're talking about the 4 and the 5-star guys, much of that is a trendy thing, and where
Sure.
and where you sit in the overall zeitgeist of college football. And if you are in that kind of that tier, like the traditions, I mean, like that, those don't matter anymore, man. Like I like, because if they did, Notre Dame would still be pulling in.
Yeah, I'm just going to say they matter, but I think your point is they don't have the same pull in recruiting. That
not even close. I think, and
Yeah.
and honestly, we probably overrate them, and even as low as we think they are down the priority list, I think they're even lower to these 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. If you don't win, and if you look bad on national TV, you have no chance. You have no chance right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that they, like, to me, like the best indication of like where Michigan was and where they were trending was pulling Al Washington out of that program and bringing him over to Ohio State, and who's by and large like maybe like a top 5 recruiter in college football. And the fact that you got him to come down to Columbus after a handful of years in Michigan, doing amazing things for Michigan on a recruiting standpoint, that should have never happened. Like, they should have never been able to do that. But I think that speaks in large part to kind of where that boat is, and maybe how much water is currently inside of it and how fast it might be sinking. It's a problem. It's a very real problem. And if they don't do something big here in the next year or two, we're talking about a Michigan football team that takes like a decade to recover.
Yeah, very well could.
And that is so
either that or you need
bad.
a transcendental coach to resurrect it somehow.
Yeah, if that happens, the overall health of the Big Ten takes a hit in a way that feels almost unquantifiable, and like that can't happen. Like, that really can't happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, we've hit on a lot of things here regarding Ohio State football. If you joined us late in the pod, again, this stream's live on YouTube, but also you can get Buckeye Breakdown wherever you want to consume your favorite podcasts. We talked quarterback, we talked running back, we talked about Chris Olave and Thayer Munford returning as a big storyline previewing the year. Expectations for the secondary, which freshmen are going to be the biggest impacts. We hit on a lot of things here, and certainly talked about Ohio State's college football playoff and national championship aspirations as well. So if you joined us late, you can certainly go back and listen to those parts. The season is here. It is with a Thursday game. Friday this week feels like Sunday will on a normal week, and we are ready to go. We've got a ton of coverage planned for you on BuckeyesNow.com.
Understatement of the century right there.
Yeah, we just kind of finalized up our content plan last night. We'll have daily podcast content for you throughout the course of the week. That will also stream live on our YouTube channel, so please make sure you're with us for that. We are definitely going to take a deep dive into some numbers, trying to break down some key matchups each week. I think we've got some really cool content that you'll enjoy. So please make Buckeyes Now part of your daily routine as we go throughout the year. and hopefully it'll be a long, fun season for the Ohio State Buckeyes. For Brett Hiltbrand, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll get rolling.
And my dog running around.
And your dog, who is just around the corner, who's made a brief cameo. That's okay.
No.
We like that too. So we'll see you again real soon. Again, Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. It's BuckeyesNow.com and right here on the Buckeyes Breakdown podcast.